to register my 1-year-old daughter's household record. I returned to City A after being away for 3 years, while my wife was handling the paperwork. I felt a bit stifled, so I carried my daughter and walked toward the door. As I opened it, I almost bumped into a woman coming from the opposite direction. I apologized and brushed past her. Just as I steadied myself, an uncertain voice came from behind me. "Benjamin, is that you?" I shook my head helplessly, turned around, and met her eyes. Chapter 1. 3 years apart. Helen seemed unchanged, still elegant, still distant, like an untouchable white lotus, but the moment she saw the child in my arms, her composed expression shattered piece by piece. "Your child?" Her voice trembled, filled with disbelief. I smiled and nodded. After receiving my confirmation, Helen clutched her chest and slowly bent over. I didn't move, simply watching her with a blank expression. After a long while, she forced herself to stand up, about to speak, when my wife walked out of the service hall. "Honey, it's done, let's go home." Seeing my wife's bright, gentle smile, I couldn't help but smile as well, but the warmth didn't last long before it was interrupted by a startled exclamation. "Francesca, why is it you?" Helen's voice carried a tone of questioning. My wife's smile faded. She looked at her calmly and gave a slight nod. I was surprised that the two of them knew each other, but I didn't ask. It clearly wasn't the right moment. After a brief greeting, my wife didn't look at Helen again. She gently looped her arm through mine and said softly, "Honey, let's go." I nodded. Holding my daughter and my wife, we walked away in the opposite direction from Helen. No goodbye, no "see you again," not even a glance. Even after we had gone quite far, I could still feel her burning gaze on my back. When I casually turned around, Helen was still standing there, as if she had never moved. Chapter 2. After driving for 3 hours, we finally returned to our home in the suburbs. My wife placed our daughter on the bed, then put on an apron and went into the kitchen to cook. Watching her busy figure, my heart filled with warmth. After dinner, we went out into the yard to enjoy the evening breeze. Lying on reclining chairs beneath the grapevine trellis, I gently waved a palm fan in my hand, brushing away the lingering heat of early summer. As I looked at my wife's gentle profile, the restlessness in my heart, stirred by seeing Helen again, gradually settled. After thinking for a moment, I spoke. "Honey, don't you have anything you want to ask me?" My wife narrowed her eyes slightly, the corners of her lips lifting. She shook her head softly. "If you want to tell me, I'll listen. If you don't, I won't ask." That's just who she is. She never forces me to do anything I'm unwilling to do. After a long pause, I decided to tell her everything. Before we got married, I had only told her that I once had a girlfriend of 6 years. As for who she was, or why we broke up, I had never mentioned it. My wife never asked about my ex either. I had thought that Helen and I would never cross paths again in this lifetime, so there was no need to bring it up. But now that we had met again, with my wife's sharp intuition, she must have already guessed most of it. I might as well make everything clear, so nothing would linger unspoken between us. Gently fanning myself, I slowly began to recount the past that had been buried in my heart for years. Chapter 3. Helen and I were high school classmates. During our first and second years, we barely had any interaction. It wasn't until our final year that she suddenly burst into my life and began pursuing me in a direct and passionate way. Helen was the school beauty. Every move she made naturally drew the attention of countless students. No one could have imagined that the aloof and untouchable Helen would take the initiative to chase after a guy, and do so boldly. Back then, she would arrive at the classroom first every morning. She'd tidy up my desk and leave breakfast on it. I rejected her, telling her plainly that she didn't need to do that, but she kept doing things her own way. During lunch breaks, she would wait for me at the door and walk with me to the cafeteria. Even if I ignored her, she never got upset. Senior year was academically intense. There was simply no time for romance, and I didn't believe something like the school beauty falling for an ordinary guy like me would ever happen. After all, before that year, Helen and I weren't close at all. We had barely even spoken, so I always kept a polite distance from her advances. But what I never expected was that Helen, who had always ranked at the top of the class, would willingly sacrifice more than 60 points just to apply to the same university as me. I still remember the first day of college. Helen stood beside me in a white dress, fresh and radiant. She smiled and said, "Benjamin, this time, you can't run away." At that moment, I started to believe that she really did like me. From then on, in classrooms, library study rooms, and the tree-lined paths on campus, there were always the two of us. I never agreed to her pursuit, but I didn't reject her either. I thought things would just continue like that, calm and ambiguous. But in the second semester of freshman year, an accident made me finally decide to accept her. It was during a departmental basketball tournament. In the middle of a scramble, I twisted my ankle. Helen was so anxious that tears streamed down her face. She wiped them away hastily and supported me, over 6 feet tall, as she struggled to help me to the infirmary. At that moment, my heart completely fell for her. During my recovery, every meal was carefully chosen by Helen and delivered to my dorm. She took care of me with genuine devotion. After I recovered, I stopped hesitating and officially entered a relationship with her. After we got together, I asked her more than once why she had suddenly fallen for me, but she never gave me a direct answer. Every time, she would just curl her lips into a playful smile and say, "Take a guess." I guessed for a long time but never figured it out. Eventually, I just stopped trying. Gradually, I became completely immersed in her tenderness. Having never been in a relationship before, I loved her with everything I had. I always wanted to give her the best of everything. I showed her my gentlest, most caring, even my most childish side. At first, Helen treated me well too, but slowly, our relationship began to change. She started taking control in the relationship. She was no longer gentle or caring toward me. She returned to her former coldness, and when she spoke to me, it felt more like giving orders than having a conversation. Finally, when we graduated from college, we had a disagreement about our future plans, and our first real conflict erupted. Chapter 4. Helen was a local of City A. Her family had businesses there. They weren't extremely wealthy, but they were definitely well off. After graduating from college, Helen's father arranged for her to join the family company. Helen wanted me to go with her, but I had studied computer science, while her family was in foreign trade, completely unrelated fields. So I firmly refused her. This was the first time since we started dating that I said no to her. Helen was furious. She thought I was being unreasonable. Why refuse an easier path when it was right in front of me? But I didn't want the knowledge I had spent 4 years learning in college to go to waste, just to become a useless freeloader in her company. I wanted a career of my own. In the end, I chose to join a major internet company. Helen went to work at her family's business. After we started working, we moved in together, although I believed my decision was right. Seeing Helen unhappy day after day made me feel guilty, so I took on all the household chores. Every day I did the laundry, cooked, and kept the home in perfect order. I took care of Helen in every possible way, just so she could feel more comfortable at home. Helen accepted my care as if it were only natural. After work, she would either binge-watch shows or shop online. Life went on quietly and uneventfully. It almost felt like this was what our married life would be like. 2 years passed like this. During those 2 years, I brought up several times the idea of having both families meet and arranging our engagement. Helen always brushed it off. At first, she would gently comfort me, telling me not to rush, that she wasn't ready yet. But gradually, she became impatient. At the time, I foolishly blamed myself. I thought maybe I was pushing too hard. After all, we were still young. Until the 3rd year of living together. One night, when Helen came home, I went up to take her bag as usual, but she pulled her hand behind her back. I looked at her in confusion, her expression cold, and didn't understand what she meant. Helen looked straight at me and spoke calmly. "Benjamin, let's break up." I froze, unable to process what she had just said. After a long moment, I finally found my voice. "Why?" I asked, my emotions surging, perhaps seeing how disheveled I looked. Helen seemed a little reluctant. With guilt on her face, she sighed softly. "Benjamin, I'm sorry. I've fallen for someone else." At that moment, it felt like I could hear my heart shattering inside my chest. I couldn't understand it. I had turned down advances from other women at work, believing I could never love anyone but Helen. Yet she could say so casually that she had fallen for someone else. I couldn't accept it. Resentment, jealousy, unwillingness, every negative emotion surged up at once. I demanded to know who it was, my voice breaking as I shouted. Helen's guilt faded. A coldness appeared in her eyes as she looked down at me from above. "Benjamin, you're an adult. Can't you control your emotions?" I was furious. She was the one who had betrayed our relationship. How could she still act morally superior and criticize me for losing control? I grabbed her arm and demanded, "Tell me, who is it?" Helen forcefully shook off my hand, frowning impatiently. "It's the new vice president at my dad's company, David." Satisfied now? After hearing the answer, I collapsed onto the sofa, drained of strength. Yeah, even if I knew who it was, what could I do about it? Chapter 5. Helen poured me a glass of water and placed it on the coffee table. Then she sat across from me and began to speak slowly. "He's a returnee, just joined the company 2 months ago. He's handsome, and very capable. Whenever I run into problems at work, just one sentence from him can completely enlighten me. How should I put it? I really admire him. When I'm with David, I feel like a princess who's finally found her prince." Seeing the sweetness and infatuation in her eyes, my heart felt like it was bleeding. 2 months. So 6 years of love meant nothing in the face of a sudden spark. Maybe I was the only one who ever cared about this relationship. Helen looked at me again, and the sweetness in her eyes instantly turned cold. "Benjamin, You're a good man. I'm the one who wronged you. But true love is unstoppable, isn't it? I wanted to ask her what made her so sure David was true love. I wanted to ask her, after chasing me so persistently back then, how could she just give up like this? I wanted to ask her what was that reason she always told me to guess, the one I could never figure out. But when the words reached my lips, I suddenly didn't want to say them anymore. The exhaustion in my heart pressed down on me so heavily I could barely breathe. I didn't want to ask. I was too tired. I nodded, returned to the bedroom, and silently packed my belongings. Helen leaned against the doorframe, quietly watching me. Several times, she seemed about to speak, but stopped herself. Maybe she wanted to say something, but then again, once I left, she could be with that vice president without any worries. In the end, she said nothing. Perhaps the future she envisioned was simply more tempting. By the time I finished packing, it was already past midnight. I walked over and, before Helen could say anything, closed the door. The moment the door shut, I couldn't hold on anymore. I slid down against it and sat on the floor. Tears streamed down uncontrollably. I didn't even know why I was crying. For the love that had ended. Or for the 6 years I had given with all my heart. Maybe both. After crying for a long time, I climbed into bed and buried my head in the blanket. All night long, countless thoughts tore through my mind. At one moment, I wanted to win her back. I couldn't accept the breakup. It hurt too much. The next moment, I told myself not to. If it was over, then I should walk away with dignity, like a man. Several times, I couldn't help but get out of bed, open the door, walk to the guest room, and think about knocking, asking Helen to come out so we could talk again. But each time, my raised hand slowly fell back down. What was there left to talk about? Once a woman's heart has changed, even your care feels like harassment to her. At that point, every word, every action, even a lingering glance, is unnecessary. I forced myself not to bow my head, not to disturb her. When dawn finally came, I dragged my luggage out of the bedroom. Helen was in the living room, on the phone. The smile on her face felt painfully dazzling. When she saw me come out, she hurriedly said a few words into the phone and hung up. Benjamin, have you found a place to stay? My emotions surged, but I forced my face to remain calm. If you want to keep renting this place, you can stay. I've already talked to the landlord. I'm moving out today. After saying that, I walked straight out the door. Behind me, I heard Helen calling my name, but I didn't turn back. Chapter 6. On the way to the company. As I looked at the streets passing by, the restaurants and milk tea shops Helen and I had once checked in at, I suddenly felt a suffocating pressure. I had been in City A for 6 years. I thought I had blended into this city, but now I realized I never truly belonged here. Even though I had officially settled in City A, I still felt like an outsider. I changed my mind. After arriving at the company, I went straight to my manager's office. In the past 2 years, I had worked hard, and my professional skills were strong. I had already become the leader of a project team. So when I submitted my resignation, my manager was surprised. He asked if I had run into any difficulties. I sighed, smiled, and shook my head, only saying that I wanted a change of environment. After thinking for a moment, he asked, Benjamin, your hometown is City H, right? I nodded. He pushed my resignation letter back toward me. Benjamin, our branch in City H is about to start operations. If you're willing, we can transfer you there. Of course, that was exactly what I wanted. After all, I only wanted to leave City A, to get farther away from Helen. That very day, I returned to my home on the outskirts of City H. Taking a deep breath, the air was filled with a familiar scent. Back when I graduated from college, I had originally planned to return to a major internet company in City H. But for Helen, I chose to stay in City A. Now, I was finally back. When I got home, my parents were surprised by my sudden return, but they didn't ask anything. They simply busied themselves preparing dinner for me. At the dinner table, my mother couldn't help but ask, Son, how long will you be staying this time? I paused, put down my chopsticks, and smiled at her. Mom, this time I'm not leaving. The branch office has been set up in City H. I'll be working here from now on. Seeing her hesitate as if she wanted to ask something, I thought for a moment and decided to tell the truth. Dad, Mom. Helen and I broke up. My father stayed silent. My mother sighed softly, about to speak, but my father gently stopped her. After dinner, I sat in the yard, my heart still aching as if it were being torn apart. My father walked over and handed me a cigarette. We smoked in silence, neither of us speaking. Only when the cigarette burned down to the filter did my father pat my shoulder. Son, I've actually wanted to tell you this for a long time. You and Helen weren't right for each other. I didn't respond, waiting for him to continue. You were together for 6 years, but she never once came to visit our home. Whenever we suggested the two families meet, she always refused. That shows she never intended to go all the way with you. I nodded silently. When you're in it, you can't see clearly. Back then, when Helen said she wasn't ready and there was no rush, it was just an excuse. She had never firmly chosen me. It was just that I loved her too much. I believed everything she said. As an outsider, my father had seen things more clearly than I ever did. Seeing me nod, he sighed and continued. 6 years of a relationship ending just like that, anyone would feel hurt. But this kind of thing, no one else can talk you out of it. You have to walk through it yourself. I just want to ask you one thing. Do you feel like you owe her anything? I shook my head calmly. For 6 years, I gave everything wholeheartedly. I don't owe her anything. My father smiled in relief. That's good, that's good. After saying that, he turned and went back inside. It took me a long time to truly understand what he meant by that's good. For 6 years, I had given everything without ever expecting anything in return. Now that I was walking away, I could do so freely, without regret, without guilt, because I owed her nothing. After figuring that out, my heart felt a little lighter. It was still tight, still heavy, but at least, every now and then, it beat for me again. I began throwing myself into work, although I would occasionally still think of Helen. It didn't hurt as much anymore. The withdrawal symptoms were slowly fading, just as everything was starting to get better. My college roommate, Morrow, called me. After returning to City H, I had changed my number and only shared it with a few close friends. He was one of them. After picking up the call, Morrow asked anxiously, "Benja, where are you?" I was a bit confused. "At home." "What's wrong?" Morrow hesitated, then asked uncertainly, "Benja, tell me honestly, did you break up with Helen?" Back in college, Helen had pursued me so intensely that all my roommates knew about us. But when I left, I hadn't told them that we had broken up. I gave a quiet, "Yeah." Morrow let out a bitter laugh and pleaded, "Benjamin, come back quickly. Helen's gone crazy." Chapter 7. When I heard that Helen had gone crazy, I was startled. My heartbeat instantly sped up. "Benjamin, she's been pestering all of us nonstop, asking for your phone number and address, without your permission. We didn't dare tell her. We thought she'd give up after a few days. But this morning, she showed up wearing a wedding dress, asking me to take her to you, saying she wants to marry you." I listened calmly. Only after he finished did I speak. "Morrow, my brother, help me tell the others, don't give Helen my number or address. I have nothing to do with her anymore." Morrow agreed and quickly hung up. I leaned back on the reclining chair, feeling puzzled. Shouldn't this be the honeymoon phase between Helen and that vice president? What exactly was she trying to do now? I thought about it for a long time but couldn't figure it out, so I stopped trying. But I knew that with Helen's stubborn personality, it was only a matter of time before she got my number. Fine. I'd enjoy whatever peace I could while it lasted. Sure enough, a week later, just after dinner, an unfamiliar number called. I walked into the yard and stood under the grapevine trellis. I stared at the phone for a long time before ultimately not picking up. Even though I looked calm on the surface, my heart was racing uncontrollably. That number was persistent. It kept calling again and again. On the 10th call, I took a deep breath and finally answered. I had expected a long silence between us, but the moment I picked up, Helen's voice came through. "Benjamin, is that you?" I gave a quiet response. Her tone immediately turned urgent. "Benjamin, where are you? I'm coming to find you." I didn't say anything. On the other end, Helen had already broken down. I had never seen her like this. When we were together, she had always been cold, distant, almost superior. Now, she was humble to the point of dust. "Benjamin, don't abandon me, okay? Didn't you want to get married? I'll come find you right now. We'll get married immediately." After she said that, she waited for my response, but all she got was my prolonged silence. After a while, disbelief crept into her voice. "Benjamin, you're not going to refuse me, are you?" I let out a soft laugh, a trace of mockery slipping into it. Helen exploded. "Benjamin, what are you laughing at? I'm telling you, this chance only comes once. If you refuse me, don't expect me to ever come back again." Helen was still Helen, unchanged. She thought marrying me was some kind of favor she was granting. If it had been before, I might have agreed without hesitation. But now, there wasn't a single trace of longing left in my heart. Yes, the withdrawal had been painful, but that pain had made me clearer than ever. Only by enduring it and coming out the other side could I truly understand what kind of love I wanted, and what kind of partner I should choose. After waiting for a long time with no response, Helen began to threaten me. "Benjamin, I gave you the chance, it's your fault for not cherishing it. Don't come crawling back to beg me in the future." With that, she hung up. I put my phone away, feeling oddly uninterested. Suddenly, loving a woman like her felt meaningless. The obsession in my heart seemed to loosen a little more. In fact, I should thank her for that call. It helped me move on faster. It had been a month since I returned home, Helen's image in my memory had already begun to blur. In truth, what I couldn't let go of was only the beauty of those 6 years. Chapter 8. Helen's call didn't stir much in my life. I still went to work every day, and after dinner, I still sat in the yard reading and drinking tea. In truth, I knew Helen must have been triggered by something to make that call. People don't look back unless they've hit a setback. Sure enough, a few days later, Morrow called again. His voice on the phone carried barely contained excitement. Benja, do you know why Helen came looking for you to get back together? I replied indifferently. If you want to say it, just say it. Morrow chuckled. Benja, you know David, right? The vice president at Helen's family company. I gave a quiet Haha. I found out everything these past few days. Right after you left, Helen immediately got together with David. They were inseparable at work, and after work, they went home together. They were basically acting like a married couple. But here's the twist, David was already married overseas, and his wife, a total force to be reckoned with. When she found out, she stormed straight into Helen's company and cornered the two of them in the office. She cursed Helen out as a homewrecker, accused her of seducing her husband, and even beat her up badly. In the end, security had to step in to restrain her. But then, that woman actually called the police. Helen's family ended up completely humiliated. I bit my lower lip. I didn't feel any sense of satisfaction, only a faint bitterness rising in my chest. Benja, don't be upset. You should feel lucky, you dodged a bullet by not marrying her. And don't blame yourself for misjudging her. We've known Helen for years. We all thought she was this cold goddess. Turns out, he trailed off. I smiled faintly and asked, so how did it end? Morrow clicked his tongue. What else? Someone uploaded the video online. David resigned and went back to the States with his wife. Rumor has it her family is very powerful over there. He didn't dare stay. You have no idea how submissive he was in front of his wife. He kept saying Helen was the one who seduced him, and that he only got involved because he was intimidated by her status. Honestly, Helen had it worse. She got beaten up. Her face was messed up, and with the video going viral, her cold goddess image completely shattered. After David left, her father suspended her from work, and a few days ago, she suddenly started asking around for your contact info, probably realized how good you were. Benja, as your friend, I'll say this, she's really not right for you, but this is your life, so the decision is yours. Hearing Morrow's words, I felt a warmth in my chest. That's what a real friend is. They care about you, offer advice when things happen, but never make decisions for you. Morrow, don't worry, there's no way between me and her anymore. Thanks for telling me all this. Next time I'm back in City A, dinner's on me. After hanging up, my mind couldn't settle for a long time. It seemed people really do change. Even someone as proud as Helen could do something so disgraceful. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. Just like Morrow said, I should be thankful I didn't marry her. If we had married, had children, and then she pulled something like this, that would have been far worse. I was also relieved that Helen hadn't continued to cling to me obsessively. Perhaps in her mind, I was the kind of person who would always wait quietly in place. Someone who would come running back the moment she turned around. And now that I refused her, she probably just thought the timing wasn't right. Without her interference, my work gradually got back on track. And I thought of her less and less. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since I left City A. Her image had grown increasingly vague. If not for running into her today, I might have almost forgotten she ever existed. Chapter 9. After listening to my story, my wife nodded and leaned into my arms. She murmured softly, Benjamin, you didn't do anything wrong. On the path of growing up, we all encounter some terrible people and messy situations. It's precisely because of those experiences that we learn to redefine what's good and what's bad, to reevaluate the people and things around us, and to gain a new understanding of the world. So don't be disappointed. Their presence is meant to teach us how to grow. We're still young, we can stay away from those toxic people and situations, and become better versions of ourselves. As for them, they might spend their whole lives stuck in that petty, ugly world. As I gently stroked her hair, my heart filled with contentment. Only when you meet the right person do you truly understand what happiness is. Actually, meeting my wife had been an accident. She was a teacher at the county middle school. It just so happened that my company had business dealings with that school, and the two people in charge of coordinating the project were her and me. The communication went smoothly. After talking for an entire morning, we finalized the cooperation plan. Talking with her felt easy. There was no tug of war, no emotional drain. After having lunch together, I headed back to the company. That evening, while I was in the office organizing the proposal, my father called. He said my mother had fallen and told me to hurry home. I rushed back as quickly as I could, but the moment I stepped inside, I heard laughter. My mother was sitting there, chatting happily with Francesca, holding her arm. When she saw me, Francesca looked surprised too. It turned out that when my mother had gone out to buy groceries, she had fallen. By coincidence, Francesca happened to pass by. She helped her up, called an ambulance, and accompanied her to the hospital. After the checkup showed nothing serious, Francesca had intended to leave, but my mother insisted on bringing her home. The reason they were chatting so enthusiastically was that my mother, before retiring, had also been a teacher at the county middle school. They had plenty to talk about. Seeing that my mother was fine, I finally let out a sigh of relief. That night, Francesca stayed for dinner at our house. After dinner, my mother asked me to walk her home. Only then did I learn that Francesca also lived in the village, the very first house at the East End. Under the bright moon and sparse stars, we walked along the dirt path between the fields, chatting casually. The soft moonlight fell on her, making her look calm and beautiful. Suddenly, I felt an urge to get closer to her. It felt as though we had known each other for a long time, in sync, naturally at ease. Even after we parted, I remained immersed in that feeling for a long time. When I got home, my mother asked me what I thought of Francesca. I thought about it and answered honestly. She glanced at me, the corners of her lips lifting slightly. Soon after, my mother began inviting Francesca over for dinner for all sorts of reasons. Strangely, Francesca never refused. Every time she came, she would even bring ingredients and help my mother wash vegetables and cook. Gradually, walking her home at night became something I looked forward to every day. That short stretch of road became the most relaxing and comforting time of my day, and the two figures on that country path grew closer and closer. There were no grand promises, no deliberate confessions. We simply walked together, and slowly, we held hands. A year after breaking up with Helen, I married Francesca. Another year later, we had our daughter. Chapter 10. A week had passed since we went to City A to register our daughter's household record. One day after work, I parked the car and had just stepped into the yard, when I saw two women confronting each other. Francesca stood there, her expression dark, staring at Helen. Helen, like a fighting rooster, refused to back down an inch. My mother stood behind Francesca, holding my daughter, her stance clearly chosen. I had never seen Francesca like this before. She was always polite to everyone, always wearing a gentle smile. Sensing something was wrong, I was about to speak, but Francesca gave me a smile, signaling me to stay silent. The moment Helen saw me, her eyes turned red. She was just about to speak when Francesca cut her off. Helen, let's talk outside. With that, she walked straight out of the yard. Helen snorted coldly. Fine, let's talk. The two of them walked out one after the other. My mother shot me a look, clearly worried that Francesca might be at a disadvantage, telling me to follow. Honestly, I was worried too, so I quietly went after them. Before long, I found them standing face to face under the big tree at the village entrance. I hid behind the tree, listening silently. Their voices gradually grew louder. Helen, what's the point of you coming here? You were the one who gave up on Benjamin. You were the one who chose to betray him and hurt him so deeply. Helen responded confidently. So what if I regret it now? You opportunistic snake. I'll treat Benjamin well from now on. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to him. Francesca let out a cold laugh. Helen, you're rotten to the core and don't even realize it. What makes you think Benjamin would ever turn back? Exposed. Helen became furious. Fine, I'm a terrible person, but what about you? Do you dare say you didn't deliberately get close to Benjamin? After graduation, you had offers from so many big companies, but you turned them all down and came here to be a teacher. What were you planning? Don't think I don't know. Francesca didn't deny it. She simply looked at Helen calmly. You're right. I came here with a bit of hope. But if you had married Benjamin, he wouldn't have come back to City H, and I wouldn't have had a chance. Right? Helen flushed red, unable to refute her. Francesca didn't let her off. Helen, don't make excuses for your own flaws. You regret it now because you see Benjamin as something that belongs to you, even if you don't want him. No one else is allowed to. You regret it now because you'll never meet someone like him again, someone who loved you wholeheartedly, expecting nothing in return. Helen bit her lip tightly, trying not to cry, but tears streamed down uncontrollably. Helen, you were very lucky to be loved so completely by Benjamin for 6 years, but you're also tragic. Only after he truly left did you realize it's time to repay what you owe. Now you finally understand, you'll never again meet someone who loves you as purely as he did. So you compare everyone to him, only to painfully realize that after him, everyone you meet wants something from you. Helen, go back. The debt you owe has only just begun. With that, Francesca turned and walked back toward home. Helen stood there under the tree for a long time, motionless. I didn't pay her any attention. I walked home with a heavy heart. My mind was completely blank. Back then, I never understood why Helen had pursued me so relentlessly. And now, I also couldn't understand why Francesca had deliberately approached me. To be honest, I couldn't quite accept it. When I got home, Francesca was talking to my mother. The moment she saw my expression, She seemed to realize something, and her face instantly turned pale. Chapter 11. Sensing the tension, my mother told us to talk things out and carried our daughter inside. Francesca pulled me to sit down in the yard. She asked cautiously, "Honey, you heard everything, didn't you?" I nodded stiffly. Her face turned pale. "Are you mad at me?" Seeing her like this, I couldn't bear it. "Shouldn't you explain?" Hearing that I was giving her a chance, Francesca quickly began. "Honey, don't be upset. Please let me finish. Do you remember, in the second semester of your sophomore year in high school, you saved a girl?" I searched my memory for a long time before it came back to me. "That girl was you." Francesca nodded firmly and began telling me everything that had happened over the years. It was one night after evening self-study. I was walking home. As I passed a small grove, I heard a girl crying for help inside. At that age, right and wrong felt crystal clear. Without thinking, I rushed in, chased off the attacker, and saved her. The girl was extremely grateful and asked for my name. In my teenage bravado, I just said, "Lay phone," and hurried off. But the girl I saved, Francesca, remembered my face. She was a year ahead of me, my senior. Soon after, she saw me again at school and recognized me immediately. In fact, Francesca had always been quite well known at school. She had excellent grades, a sweet appearance, the kind of student parents always compared their kids to. She had a calm personality, never competing or showing off. Both teachers and classmates liked her, but back then, my mind was entirely on studying. I didn't even know who she was. Francesca quietly watched me from afar for a long time. When she graduated, she was admitted to a university in another province. At the time, she didn't dare confess to me, afraid it would affect my studies. She planned to wait until I got into college before telling me how she felt. But unexpectedly, not long after I entered university, I got together with Helen. When Francesca heard the news, she was heartbroken, but she didn't disturb me. She simply buried her feelings deep inside. Later, her family moved to City A, and she rarely had the chance to come back. Until after graduation, she turned down offers from major companies and returned to the county to become a middle school teacher. She even bought a house in the village. She said that at the time, she didn't even know what she was waiting for. She just had a feeling that if she didn't do it, she would regret it. But she never expected that later I would come back, and that we would reconnect so naturally. And in the end, we got married. After finishing, she looked at me carefully and asked, "Honey, can you forgive me?" I was deeply moved. I pulled her tightly into my arms. Since when did bravely pursuing love become something wrong? No wonder. When I first met you, it felt like I'd known you for a long time. Francesca hugged me back just as tightly. After holding each other for a long time, I finally asked, puzzled, "Then how did you and Helen know each other?" Francesca pursed her lips. "We knew each other since childhood. It turned out that Helen and Francesca had once been neighbors, but because of business, Helen's family moved back to City A early on. At that time, no one could take care of her, so Helen stayed at her aunt's home in City H. When they were young, Francesca had always been the model child, calm, quiet, excellent in school. Everyone praised her. Helen, on the other hand, was different, outgoing, almost like a tomboy. Gradually, the adults began comparing her to Francesca. Helen refused to accept it. She started imitating Francesca, becoming quiet, reserved, even copying the way she walked. But even so, the adults still constantly mentioned Francesca. Slowly, that unwillingness turned into jealousy. When Francesca raised a cat, Helen would trick it away and abandon it. When Francesca liked a dress, Helen would accidentally spill ink on it. Chapter 12. It wasn't until our second year of high school that she noticed Francesca often staring at me. Lost in thought, her eyes filled with tenderness and quiet longing. Helen could tell that was love. So she began to pursue me like crazy, and at that moment, I finally understood why she had chased after me back then. It wasn't because she loved me, it was jealousy. Anything Francesca liked, she had to ruin. She had to take it for herself. A knock on the door interrupted my conversation with Francesca. When I opened it, Helen was standing outside. Her eyes were filled with pleading as she looked at me. "Benjamin, I'm sorry. I really regret it. Can you forgive me?" I curled my lips slightly. "You've already done what you're sorry for. There's no point in saying sorry now." Helen bit her lower lip tightly. After a long pause, she spoke hesitantly. "Benjamin, it's okay if you don't forgive me, but Francesca isn't a good person either. She approached you deliberately." I frowned, displeased, and cut her off. "Can you stop? Helen, you're really rotten to the core." She looked at me in shock. I said firmly, "Francesca approached me out of love. What about you?" "Helen, you're truly despicable. Just because of your jealousy, you're capable of anything." Helen panicked and waved her hands quickly. "Benjamin, I love you too. I really do. I admit, at the beginning it was jealousy that drove me to pursue you. But as time went on, I really fell in love with you. I couldn't listen anymore. Enough. Helen, if that vice president hadn't turned out to be such a mess, would you have even come back? If he didn't have all those problems, you would have long forgotten who I even was. But then again, people like you always end up with people like that. It's just a matter of who's worse. Helen, stop bothering me. Someone like you only belongs in the gutter. With that, I closed the door and took Francesca back to our room. Helen left. She never came back to bother us again. We didn't hear anything about her for a long time, until Mauro called. Benja, did you hear? Helen's completely let herself go. She's been going through men one after another, partying every day, living it up, but I heard she caught a serious disease. Doesn't have long left. After saying that, Mauro spat angrily. I listened in silence. Sure enough, for someone completely rotten. A rotten end was the only destination.